It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon at the mall. People walked around with shopping bags, kids ran with balloons, and music played softly through the speakers. But right in the middle of the main hallway, a little girl stood surrounded by adults. Her hair was messy, her hoodie too big, and her eyes, those serious eyes, didn't blink once. In front of her, a security guard laughed so loudly that everyone nearby turned to look. "Your mom's a general? Oh, come on, little one. You think I'm that dumb?" he shouted, almost choking with laughter. The crowd chuckled nervously. The girl didn't say a word. She just stared at him, calm but angry. He bent over to meet her eyes. "Let me guess," he said, smirking. "Next, you'll tell me your dad's the president?" People around started to whisper. The girl's face hardened. "She's coming," she said quietly. The guard rolled his eyes and laughed again. But then the air changed. From the end of the corridor, heavy boots started echoing one after another, sharp and fast. Everyone turned toward the sound. A group of soldiers entered in perfect formation, and leading them was a woman in full military uniform, her face cold and focused. The word commander shone on her vest. The little girl looked up and smiled for the first time. "That's her," she whispered. "Hey, before we keep going, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel." Now let's go back a little, because what happened 10 minutes earlier is where everything really began. Camilla was only 10, but she didn't act like most kids her age. While others played with phones or watched videos, she spent hours reading manuals her mother brought home, books about survival, leadership, and discipline. She didn't always understand the words, but she liked how strong they sounded. She lived with her mother, General Lucia Vega, in a small house near the military base. Life there was quiet, predictable. Lucia was strict but caring. Every morning she made Camilla tie her shoes properly, say good morning with confidence, and never lie, no matter what. "People can take everything from you, Camilla," her mother would say, "but not your word." That phrase stuck with her. That day, her mother had been called for an emergency meeting at the base, so Camilla decided to visit the mall nearby to buy a small gift, a leather notebook. She had been saving coins for weeks. It was supposed to be a surprise for her mom's birthday. But just as she entered the mall, she noticed something strange. 2 men in dark clothes were following her, not close enough to grab her, but close enough for her to notice. One of them spoke into his sleeve, like in the movies. Camilla pretended not to see them and walked faster, turning down a corridor near the service elevators. She could feel her heart beating faster. Camilla remembered what her mother had taught her. If something ever felt wrong, she had to find a crowd, stay in the open, and look for someone in uniform. So she ran into the central hall of the mall and spotted a security guard by the fountain. She went straight to him, breathless, and said, "Sir, please, I need help." Officer Mendez looked down, bored, half paying attention. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Lose your mom?" he asked, chewing gum. "No," Camilla said quickly. "She's on her way, but there are men following me." He frowned, glancing around lazily. "Men following you? Here? Don't make up stories, kid." Camilla shook her head. "I'm not lying. My mom told me to look for someone in uniform if—" He interrupted her, laughing. "And your mom's who exactly?" "The mayor?" Camilla looked at him straight and said, "She's a general." Mendez's eyes widened for a second. Then he burst out laughing. "A general? In the army?" he shouted. A few shoppers stopped to watch. "Oh, sure. And I'm the head of the Navy. Come on, kid, tell me another." He waved his hand dismissively. Camilla crossed her arms, trying not to cry. "I'm telling the truth," she insisted. "She's coming here right now." The guard shook his head, still chuckling. "Right, let me guess. She's coming to rescue you from the candy store." He looked at the people around, trying to make them laugh. "We've got a real comedian here." But behind his fake smile, something else happened. His radio crackled. A voice came through, low and hurried. "Mendez, keep the girl there. Don't let her go." His laughter stopped. He pressed the radio closer. "Say again?" The voice repeated. "Don't let her leave. She knows." Mendez straightened up, glancing around. "What's going on?" he muttered, but but the radio went silent. He turned back to Camilla, his tone suddenly serious. "Who told you to come here?" She looked confused. "I told you, my mom." "Don't lie to me," he snapped. People nearby started to whisper again, noticing the change in his tone. Camilla stepped back, frightened but firm. "I'm not lying." A few meters away, one of the men in dark clothes appeared by the entrance, pretending to look at a shop window. He touched his earpiece. Mendez noticed him and frowned. "Hey, you know those guys?" he asked. Camilla turned her head, and when she saw them, she froze. "Those are the ones following me," she whispered. Mendez finally understood that something wasn't right. He reached for his radio again, but before he could speak, a message came through. Another voice, sharper this time. "Mendez, this is Director Salgado. Handle the situation quietly. We don't want a scene." The guard swallowed hard. The director never spoke directly unless things were serious. "Copy that," he said, forcing a smile. He leaned toward Camilla. "Listen, why don't we go somewhere quieter, huh? Somewhere safe?" His tone tried to sound gentle, but his eyes betrayed him. Camilla hesitated. "I don't want to go anywhere. I'll wait here." Mendez forced a chuckle. "Come on, kid. Don't make me look bad in front of all these people." He reached for her arm, but she stepped back again. That's when one of the men by the entrance started walking toward them. Mendez realized he was trapped between his orders and his conscience. He grabbed Camilla's wrist, gently but firmly. "We're going to the office. Let's go." She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. People began to film with their phones. "Let me go!" she shouted. Meanwhile, in a military base several kilometers away, General Lucia Vega was in a meeting when a technician ran in, pale and nervous. "General," he said, "we just received an emergency code, Signal Vega 01. Lucia stood up immediately. "Repeat that," she demanded. "Vega 01, ma'am. It came from Plaza Dorada." For a second, she couldn't breathe. That signal was one she had set up herself. Only her daughter could trigger it, and only if she was in danger. Lucia didn't wait for permission. "Prepare my vehicle," she ordered, but her subordinate, Commander Torres, stepped in front of her. "General, you can't leave without clearance." "We don't know the situation." Lucia glared at him. "That's my daughter out there." He tried to argue. "If you go rogue, it'll be on record." "Then record it," she said, and walked out. Back at the mall, Mendez dragged Camilla toward the security office. Inside, Director Salgado waited, sweating, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I have her," he whispered. "No, she doesn't have it yet, but we'll find it." When he saw Mendez enter, he quickly hung up and smiled. "Ah, there you are. Poor girl, she must be lost." Camilla shook her head. "I'm not lost. You're lying." Salgado blinked. "Excuse me? You just lied on the phone," she said. "I heard you." Mendez looked at her uneasy. "Sir, what's going on?" Salgado waved him off. "Nothing you need to worry about. Take her to the back." Mendez frowned. "The back? Why?" Salgado forced a smile. "Orders from above. Just do it." Mendez hesitated. He didn't like where this was going. Camilla's eyes begged him for help, but before he could decide, his radio crackled again. "Delete the footage," a voice said. "Now." Mendez froze. "What footage?" "The cameras in the main hall. Wipe everything from the last 10 minutes. He realized that this wasn't about a lost child. It was something much darker. He looked at Salgado, who was now pacing nervously. "Sir, what's this about?" Salgado stopped, staring coldly. "You ask too many questions." In that moment, Mendez understood that he had made a mistake bringing the girl here. He glanced at Camilla, who was quietly studying the room, eyes darting toward the security monitors. Then, suddenly, every screen flickered. For a split second, one of the cameras showed a group of men unloading crates in the basement labeled relief supplies. But when Salgado noticed, he quickly pulled the plug. "Out!" he barked. "Everyone out!" Outside, the crowd had started to gather again. People whispered, wondering why the guard had taken the girl away. Some had recorded everything. The atmosphere was tense, uncertain, and then, from the distance, came a deep, steady sound, the rhythm of boots against tile. One by one, the soldiers entered the mall, perfectly synchronized. Shoppers gasped, moving aside as the soldiers advanced. At the front, with her helmet shining under the lights and her expression cold as stone, walked General Lucia Vega. She stopped right in front of Mendez, who froze completely. Camilla looked up, tears in her eyes, whispering, "I told you she was coming." The mall fell silent. Lucia's voice cut through the air. "Step away from my daughter." Everyone stopped breathing. Mendez took a step back, shaking. Salgado appeared behind him, stammering, "General Vega, what a surprise!" But Lucia's stare silenced him. Without saying another word, she knelt beside Camilla and hugged her tightly. Then she stood, turning toward the two men at the entrance, her hand already reaching for her sidearm. The soldiers behind her raised their rifles, and that was the moment everyone in the mall realized. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Something much bigger was about to unfold. Mendez kept pacing inside the security office, his nerves on edge, his shirt sticking to his back with sweat. Outside, the mall was still buzzing, people whispering about the little girl and the soldiers who had shown up earlier. But for now, everything seemed to have calmed down, at least on the surface. The truth was, nothing was calm. Inside that small room full of monitors, the air was heavy. Camilla sat in a chair, her hands in her lap, quiet, watching every move Mendez made. He tried to look confident, but his heart was racing. He didn't know who to be afraid of anymore. His boss, the men in dark clothes, or that girl who looked at him like she could see right through him. "Why don't you just tell me what's going on, huh?" Mendez finally said, turning toward her. "You said your mom was coming. Well, she came. And now what, you two soldiers or something?" Camilla didn't answer. Her eyes were on one of the monitors that showed the mall's corridors. People were still walking, but some areas were strangely empty, as if someone had told the stores to quietly shut down. "She's here because of them," Camilla said softly. "Who?" Mendez frowned. "The men who were following me." He turned back to the monitors, uneasy. "Those guys? I told the director about them. He said they were plainclothes police. Nothing to worry about." Camilla shook her head slowly. "They're not police." At that moment, Director Salgado walked in, acting like everything was normal. His tone was too cheerful, his smile too wide. "Good job, Mendez. I see you've kept our guests safe." Mendez crossed his arms. "Sir, I think you should know." "I already know," Salgado interrupted, patting him on the shoulder. "Everything is under control. You can go now." Mendez didn't move. "With respect, sir, I'd rather stay. Something's off. There are too many people acting strange, and this girl—" "Officer," Salgado cut him off again, his voice colder now. "Do you know what happens to guards who don't follow orders?" Mendez froze. Salgado smiled. "They lose their job, or worse." Camilla's voice broke the tension. "You're scared of her," she said, looking straight at him. Salgado turned sharply. "What did you say?" "You're scared of my mom," Camilla repeated. "That's why you're pretending everything's fine." For a moment, no one spoke. Salgado's jaw tightened. "Little girl," he said, walking closer, "you have no idea what you're talking about." But his hands were shaking. Mendez saw it and took a small step forward. "Sir, what's really going on here?" he asked quietly. Salgado turned to him with a look that could kill. "You want to keep your job? Then stop asking questions." Meanwhile, somewhere beneath them, in the dark basement of the mall, a group of men worked fast, moving crates and closing metal doors. One of them whispered into a radio, "The general's here. We need to move the shipment now." Another answered, "We can't. The trucks aren't ready." "Then burn the documents." "Everything." The men looked at each other nervously, the air filled with fear. Back upstairs, Mendez's radio came to life again. "Unit 2. Report." He pressed the button. "Unit 2 here." The voice on the other end was trembling. "We just found something near the loading dock. Military equipment. Unmarked boxes." Mendez's stomach dropped. "Say again." "Weapons," the voice repeated. "Lots of them." Mendez looked at Salgado, who was pretending not to hear. "Sir," Mendez said, "they found—" "Enough!" Salgado barked. "That's classified. You didn't hear anything." He turned to Camilla and forced a smile. "Come with me, little one. We're going to clear this up." But Camilla didn't move. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said firmly. "I'll wait for my mom." Mendez saw the fear flicker across Salgado's face for just a second. It was quick, but it was there. Then Salgado's phone rang. He answered, whispering, stepping aside. "Yes. She's still here. No, the general hasn't found us yet. We can still fix this." He listened for a moment, nodded, and turned back. "Officer Mendez," he he said calmly. Escort her to the lower level. Mendez hesitated. Why? Because it's safer there. Camilla looked at Mendez. Don't, she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes pleaded. Please don't. Mendez didn't move. Salgado's patience snapped. Now, he shouted. The sudden anger startled both of them. Camilla jumped, and Mendez instinctively stepped in front of her. Sir, I'm not taking her anywhere until you tell me what's happening. For a moment, everything was silent except for the buzzing of the monitors. Salgado glared at him, then exhaled slowly, like a man deciding something heavy. Fine, he said. You want the truth? Follow me. He opened the door, motioning them out. They walked down a long hallway that led to a locked service elevator. Salgado used a keycard to open it. You want to know what your general mother is hiding from you? He said bitterly. She's not the hero everyone thinks she is. Camilla frowned. Don't talk about her like that. Salgado smirked. Oh, she didn't tell you. She used to work for the same people who run this operation. She made a deal years ago. That's how she got her rank. That's how she got everything. Mendez's eyes widened. That's not possible. Salgado turned to him. Oh, it's very possible. You think generals get their power by being kind? The elevator door opened to the basement. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. Inside, dozens of crates were stacked, all stamped with fake company logos. Camilla's eyes darted from one to another. What is this? She whispered. Salgado stepped forward. This, little one, is what your mother's been protecting for years. Weapons, money, power, all hidden behind fancy words like justice and duty. Mendez shook his head. That's not true. Believe what you want, Salgado said, but I've got proof. He pulled out a folder from a drawer nearby. Inside were papers, photos, signatures, all with the name Lucia Vega. Camilla's face went pale. No, she said softly. She wouldn't, but she stopped, her voice trembling. Mendez looked at the papers too, his mind spinning. Could it be true? Was this whole thing just one big lie? Salgado smiled, sensing the doubt. Now you understand why she came running here? She's not here to save you, child. She's here to cover her tracks. But before anyone could say another word, the sound of boots echoed down the corridor. Not slow, urgent. Shouts filled the air. Freeze! Hands up! Soldiers flooded into the basement, weapons drawn. Salgado froze like a rat caught in a trap. Mendez raised his hands, stepping back. Lucia entered, calm and firm, her helmet under her arm, her eyes locked on her daughter. Camilla, she said softly, come here. Camilla hesitated, torn between everything she'd just heard and the woman standing before her. Mom, she said, her voice breaking. He said you don't listen to him, Lucia said quickly. He's lying. Salgado laughed, the sound cold and bitter. Lying? Go ahead, General. Tell her you didn't sign those deals. Tell her you didn't take their money. Lucia's jaw clenched. You forged everything. Did I? Salgado raised the folder. Because these look pretty real to me. He turned to Camilla. Your mother isn't who you think she is. Lucia's voice was sharp. That's enough. The soldiers surrounded them. Lucia gave a hand signal. Two of them grabbed Salgado. But before they could take him away, he shouted, Check the records, General. Check your own office. You'll find my name there, signed by your hand. The words echoed. Camilla looked at her mother, searching her face for answers. Lucia didn't speak. Her silence said more than words could. That silence was heavy, confusing. Mendez felt it too. He looked at the woman who had entered like a storm and saw something flicker in her eyes, a mix of anger and guilt. The soldiers began to escort Salgado out, but as they did, one of the men working in the basement whispered into a radio, Plan B, now! Suddenly, an explosion shook the ground. The lights flickered. Smoke filled the room. People screamed. Get down! Lucia shouted, pulling Camilla close. Mendez covered his head as debris rained down. Salgado used the chaos to push one of the soldiers aside and run toward a side exit. Lucia yelled, Stop him! But it was too late. He was gone. When the smoke began to clear, Camilla clung to her mother, shaking. Lucia held her tight, whispering, You're safe now. That's what matters. But her eyes told a different story. Mendez saw it. She wasn't just worried about Salgado escaping, she was afraid of something else, something he didn't yet understand. Camilla finally spoke, her voice trembling. Mom, was he telling the truth? Lucia didn't answer. She just looked away. Mendez stared at her, realizing that maybe this whole situation was much bigger than anyone had thought. He'd started the day laughing at a little girl's story, and now he was standing between soldiers, weapons, and lies that reached higher than he could ever imagine. And as alarms began to echo through the mall, a new voice came through Lucia's radio. It was Commander Torres, his tone calm but menacing. "General Vega," he said, "you should have stayed out of this. Now it's too late." Lucia's expression hardened. "Torres," she whispered, gripping her weapon. "So it was you!" Mendez felt a chill run through him. The soldiers looked at each other, unsure. Camila stepped back, holding her mother's hand. "Who is he?" she asked. Lucia didn't take her eyes off the radio. Someone who just declared war. And at that exact moment, the lights went out completely. The emergency alarms screamed louder. The red lights blinked in the smoke. The soldiers aimed their weapons toward the entrance. A shadow moved through the haze, and everyone knew the real danger hadn't even begun yet. The red lights were still flashing when Lucia pushed through the smoke, barking orders to her soldiers to secure the exits. Her voice was strong, but inside she was boiling with fear. She couldn't show it, not in front of her team, and especially not in front of her daughter. Camila clung to her arm, coughing, her small hand shaking. Mendez followed close behind, confused, trying to keep up with what was happening. The explosion had thrown him against a wall, and his head still rang, but he didn't dare speak. The look in Lucia's eyes was enough to keep him quiet. She was no longer just a mother. She was a commander in full control, and every step she took sent a message that things were far from over. "Move her out of here!" one of the soldiers shouted, but Lucia stopped him with a hand signal. "She stays with me," she said. "No one touches her." There was something about her tone that made everyone fall silent. Even in the middle of chaos, she had authority that no one questioned. Still, Mendez noticed something unusual in her face. It wasn't just determination. It was guilt, like she was carrying the weight of something she couldn't say out loud. The emergency lights flickered again, and the floor vibrated as more explosions sounded from the basement. They weren't big enough to destroy the place, but they were enough to make everyone run. Lucia grabbed her radio. "This is Vega. Who authorized detonations?" A voice came back through the static. "No one, ma'am. We think it's Torres's men. They're still inside." Lucia's jaw tightened. "Then find them and keep that director alive. I want him breathing when I find him." As they moved toward the upper level, Mendez couldn't help asking, "General, who is Torres? He's on your side or theirs?" Lucia didn't look at him. "He was on mine," she said. "Now I don't know." Mendez swallowed hard. The way she said it made it clear that whatever had broken between them wasn't just about the mission, it was personal. Camila tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "that man said bad things about you." Lucia stopped walking for a moment, her heart pounding. She crouched down and looked her daughter in the eyes. "Listen to me," she said softly. "People will say a lot of things about me, especially now, but you know who I am, right?" Camila hesitated, then nodded, though her face was full of doubt. Lucia smiled faintly. "That's all that matters." But as she stood up and turned away, her smile vanished. Mendez saw it. Whatever Salgado had said back there had hit her harder than she wanted to admit. They reached the mall's main hall, now filled with smoke and frightened shoppers. Soldiers tried to keep order, while paramedics treated the injured. The smell of burned plastic filled the air. Lucia looked around, searching for signs of Torres's men. Mendez pointed toward a broken security camera. "That one was cut before the blast," he said. "Someone knew exactly where to hit." Lucia nodded, impressed despite herself. "He's good," she muttered. "Too good." Then a soldier ran up, out of breath. "General, we found a vehicle leaving the underground parking. Black SUV, tinted windows. It broke through the barrier." Lucia turned sharply. "Who was inside?" "We think it's the director, ma'am, and one more person." Lucia frowned. "Torres." The soldier nodded. She didn't hesitate. "Get a team ready. We're going after them." But as she spoke, her radio crackled again. This time it was Torres's voice, calm and cold. "Lucia, always rushing in. You never learned patience, did you?" Everyone froze. Lucia grabbed the radio. "Torres, you're finished. Surrender now before this gets worse." He laughed. "Worse? My dear General, you have no idea how deep this goes. You think this is about guns and smuggling? You really don't know what they've been hiding from you, do you? Lucia's hand tightened around the radio. If you want to talk, face me. Oh, I will, Torres said. But not yet. You've got bigger problems. Maybe check your base. I think you'll find a surprise waiting. Then the line went dead. Mendez looked at her uneasy. What did he mean? Lucia didn't answer. She turned to one of her soldiers. Get me the command center. Now. The man nodded and ran off. Lucia looked around, her mind spinning. Torres wouldn't risk open war unless he had something powerful, something she didn't know about. Camilla pulled at her sleeve again. Mom, are we in danger? Lucia knelt down and took her hand. I won't let anything happen to you, she said, but her voice cracked slightly. That was enough for Mendez to realize that this woman who looked so strong was hanging by a thread. She was trying to protect her daughter and an entire operation at the same time, and both were slipping away from her. Moments later, the soldier returned with a tablet showing a live feed from the base. The image was shaky, full of static, but clear enough to see smoke rising. The base was under attack. Lucia's face went pale. No, she whispered. That's impossible. Mendez leaned closer. Who would do that? She shook her head, almost to herself. Only someone who knows every code, every blind spot, every man inside. Her voice hardened. Torres. The radio buzzed again. This time it was a young lieutenant's voice, panicked. General Vega! The storage wing is compromised. We're losing control. They took the data vault. Lucia closed her eyes for a second. Evacuate non-combatants. Seal all exits. We can't, ma'am. They're inside already. The sound of gunfire cut through the signal, and then silence. Camilla covered her ears, terrified. Lucia took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. He's not just after the shipment, she said. He's after something else. Mendez frowned. Like what? Lucia hesitated. Files. Information that could destroy careers, governments, maybe even mine. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mendez said quietly, You really think he'd do all this just for revenge? Lucia looked at him. Revenge is just the surface. People like Torres, they want control, and the ones who gave him power are counting on us tearing each other apart. A distant explosion from outside made everyone flinch. Lucia's soldiers started shouting orders, but she stayed focused. We need to find Torres before he leaks anything, she said. Mendez nodded. You think he'll come back? He doesn't run, Lucia said. He wants to humiliate me. They moved toward the parking area, where the black SUV had been spotted. The floor was littered with debris, and the smell of gasoline filled the air. A few wounded guards lay nearby. One of them pointed weakly to the corner. They switched cars, ma'am. Went that way. Lucia followed his gesture and saw fresh tire marks leading toward the service tunnel. As they approached the tunnel, Camilla stopped walking. She stared at the ground. Mom, look. Lucia turned. There, half hidden under a piece of metal, was a small silver bracelet, one she recognized instantly. It had belonged to Torres's brother, who had died years ago in an ambush during one of her operations. Torres had never forgiven her for it. She picked it up slowly, her hand trembling. Mendez watched her face change. It wasn't just anger now, it was pain. That's why he's doing this, she said quietly. He blames me. Mendez nodded. But what happened? Lucia took a deep breath. His brother disobeyed orders. I told him to hold position, but he rushed in. I tried to save him, but he didn't make it. Torres never believed it was an accident. Camilla listened, her eyes wide. You didn't tell him that? Lucia shook her head. Some truths don't matter when people want someone to hate. They entered the service tunnel. It was dark and narrow, the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls. Lucia motioned for silence. Somewhere ahead, they could hear footsteps and faint voices. Mendez gripped his flashlight, but Lucia signaled him to turn it off. They're close, she whispered. They moved slowly, hugging the wall until they reached a fork in the tunnel. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Sparks flew from the concrete near Lucia's head. She pushed Camilla behind her, shouting, Get down! Mendez returned fire blindly. Shadows moved ahead. A figure stepped into the dim light. It was one of Torres's men. Lucia fired once, hitting him in the leg. He fell, cursing. She ran over, grabbed him by the collar and pressed her gun to his chest. Where is he? The man groaned. He's gone. Gone where? He's meeting someone upstairs. The roof. Lucia knocked him out and turned to Mendez. Stay with her, she ordered, but Camilla grabbed her arm. No, I'm not staying here. Camilla, please, you promised not to leave me. Lucia hesitated. There was no time to argue. She nodded. Fine. Stay close. They climbed the stairs up toward the roof, each step echoing through the stairwell. When they pushed the door open, the cold night air hit them. The city lights glowed below, sirens wailing in the distance. At the center of the rooftop, near the edge, stood Torres. He had a pistol in one hand and a small device in the other. I was wondering when you'd get here, he said, smiling faintly. Lucia raised her weapon. Drop it. Always so direct, he said. You never liked talking. Mendez aimed too, but Torres didn't seem afraid. You could shoot me right now, he said, but it won't change what's already done. The files are out there. Your secrets, Vega. Everyone's secrets. Lucia's heart pounded. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, he said, because truth is the only thing left worth fighting for. Camilla stepped forward, her small voice trembling. You're lying. Torres looked at her, almost kindly. I wish I were, little one, but your mother built her career on lies. Lucia shouted. That's enough. She fired a warning shot, hitting the metal railing near him. Torres didn't flinch. You still don't get it, he said. This isn't about you anymore. It's about what comes next. He pressed a button on the device. A light flashed, and somewhere in the distance, alarms began to wail. Lucia ran forward, tackling him to the ground. The device flew out of his hand and skidded across the roof. Mendez rushed to grab it, but as he did, the sound of helicopters filled the air. Spotlights cut through the night. Soldiers shouted from above. Torres laughed through clenched teeth. You're too late. Lucia held him down, her face inches from his. What did you do? Torres smiled. I opened the door, and down below, in the city streets, something exploded again. Bigger, louder, and closer than before. The rooftop shook, and everyone froze, staring at the rising cloud of fire in the distance. Lucia's radio came to life with frantic voices. General, the base, it's gone. Lucia's eyes went wide with shock. Torres smiled, blood on his lips. Now you understand, he said softly. This isn't a war you can win. And as the helicopter lights flickered above them, Lucia realized everything had changed. Nothing would ever be the same again. The rooftop was still shaking when Lucia pulled Camilla into her arms and shielded her from the falling debris. The city lights below flickered, sirens screamed in the distance, and smoke rose like a giant wave over the horizon. Mendez held onto the railing, trying to stay on his feet as the wind whipped across the roof. Torres, bleeding from his shoulder, still managed to smile through the chaos. You feel that, Vega? He said with a hoarse laugh. That's the sound of your world falling apart. Lucia turned toward him, eyes blazing, but her voice came out calm, the kind of calm that scares more than shouting. You just declared war on the wrong person. Torres spat blood and grinned. No, Lucia, you declared it years ago. I'm just finishing it. Before she could answer, a gunshot echoed. One of the soldiers fired, but Torres rolled aside, grabbed his pistol and fired back. The bullet shattered the metal railing beside Lucia's head. She dropped flat, pushing Camilla behind a vent for cover. Mendez dove beside them, cursing under his breath. He's insane, he said, fumbling for his weapon. No, Lucia muttered, crawling toward the edge. He's desperate. She peered around the vent, but Torres was gone. He'd slipped through the smoke and vanished down the maintenance stairs. Lucia stood up and shouted into her radio, All units, Torres is on the move. Lock down every exit. Her soldiers responded, but she knew he wouldn't be easy to catch. Torres had once been her right hand, her strategist, the man who knew every move before she made it. Now that knowledge made him her worst enemy. Camilla clung to her mother's arm. Mum, what's happening? Why did he say it's your fault? Lucia didn't answer right away. She just took a deep breath, staring at the burning sky. Because when people lose everything, she said softly, they need someone to blame. Camilla frowned. But is he lying? Lucia's jaw tightened. He's twisting the truth. That's what traitors do. But inside, those words stung. They made their way back down the stairwell, their footsteps echoing over the alarms. The smell of smoke grew stronger the lower they went. Mendez was limping slightly, his knee injured from the blast, but he kept going, his face pale. General, he said, panting. If the base is gone, what happens now? Lucia didn't look at him. Now, she said, we stop him before he turns the country against us. On the ground floor, chaos had taken over. The mall was a mess, broken glass, fallen signs, people running and crying. Soldiers tried to direct civilians to safety, but no one really knew where safety was anymore. News crews were already arriving, cameras flashing as journalists shouted questions. General Vega, what happened? Who's responsible for the explosions? Lucia ignored them, pushing through the crowd with Camilla at her side. One reporter got too close, sticking a microphone in her face. Is it true your own men turned against you? Lucia stopped cold. The soldier beside her moved to push the man away, but Lucia raised her hand. She looked straight into the camera and said, the truth will come out, and when it does, you'll see who's really been betraying this country. Then she turned and walked off without another word. In the control room, the air was thick with tension. The remaining officers stood around a large table covered in maps and screens. Lucia entered, and everyone went silent. Report, she ordered. One of them spoke quickly. General, communications with the base are down. We've lost contact with all remaining personnel. The system logs show massive data transfers before the explosion. Lucia's stomach dropped. Transferred to where? The officer hesitated. We don't know. The signal was rerouted through 5 different channels. Find it, she snapped. Now! Mendez watched from the corner, trying to process everything. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a mall guard who'd stumbled into something way beyond his world. But now, somehow, he was part of it. He looked at Lucia, standing tall in front of the screens, giving orders like nothing could break her. Yet he could see it in her eyes, the fear she tried to hide. She wasn't just fighting an enemy out there, she was fighting something inside herself too. Then one of the young technicians called out, General, we got something. The data was sent to an old military relay near the mountains, but it's not under our control anymore. Lucia walked over. Whose control is it under? The technician looked nervous. It's registered under Commander Torres's name. He must have activated it before going rogue. Lucia slammed her fist on the table. That's his backup site. He's moving faster than I thought. She turned to her second in command. Prepare 2 helicopters. We leave in 10 minutes. Camilla, who had been sitting quietly in a corner, suddenly stood up. I'm going too. Lucia froze. No, you're not. I'm not staying here, Camilla insisted. Every time you leave me behind, something bad happens. I'm coming with you. Lucia's tone softened, but her eyes stayed firm. Camilla, this isn't a game. What's waiting out there is dangerous. So am I, the girl said stubbornly. You always said I should be brave. Let me prove it. Mendez watched the argument and stepped in carefully. General, maybe she should come. The press is outside, the mall isn't safe, and honestly, wherever you go might be the safest place for her right now. Lucia looked between the two of them, then sighed heavily. Fine, but she stays close, and if anything happens, you take her and run. Understood? Mendez nodded. Understood. They moved quickly, gathering supplies and boarding the helicopters. The rotors roared as they lifted off into the smoky night sky. From above, the city looked wounded, fires glowing like open cuts, sirens flashing across the streets. Camilla leaned against the window, her eyes wide. Why do people do this? She asked quietly. Lucia didn't answer for a while. Finally, she said, because some people would rather destroy everything than admit they were wrong. Half an hour later, they reached the mountains. The night was cold and silent except for the hum of the engines. The pilots landed the helicopters near a group of abandoned warehouses surrounded by forest. The moment the rotors stopped, Lucia jumped out, pistol in hand. The others followed. The area looked empty, but Lucia's instincts told her they weren't alone. She motioned for silence and crouched low. They moved carefully toward the largest warehouse, its metal doors half open. Inside, the darkness swallowed them. The air smelled of oil and damp earth. Mendez whispered, "You sure he's here?" "He's here," Lucia said. "He wants me to find him." Suddenly, a spotlight turned on from above, blinding them. A voice echoed through the building. "Welcome, General." It was Torres. His voice carried a calm confidence that sent chills down everyone's spine. "You brought company, I see. Your little one, too. Brave choice." Lucia aimed her gun toward the source of the voice. "Show yourself." "In time," Torres replied. "First, I want you to listen." The sound of machinery filled the air, and a giant screen lit up on the far wall. It showed footage, grainy, black and white clips of soldiers, documents, and official meetings. Then came the part that made Lucia's heart stop. It showed her signing papers, shaking hands, authorizing shipments. To anyone watching, it looked like she was approving illegal deals. Mendez glanced at her, confused. "Is that real?" he whispered. Lucia didn't answer. Her face was pale. "Those papers were altered," she said through gritted teeth. Torres's voice boomed again. "Altered? You think the world will believe that? This is what you built your career on, Lucia. Lies and silence." The soldiers around her shifted uneasily. She could feel their trust cracking. Torres kept talking. "You've always been the perfect soldier, haven't you? Loyal, obedient, ruthless when needed. But you forgot one thing. You can't bury the truth forever." Lucia shouted, "You don't care about truth. You care about revenge." "Revenge?" He laughed. "You took my brother from me. You covered it up and called it collateral damage. So yes, maybe it's revenge, but maybe it's justice too." Camilla stepped forward, her small voice trembling. "That's not true. My mom isn't a liar." Torres's voice softened. "Oh, little one, I wish you could see her the way I do. She's not evil. She's just like me. A soldier doing what she's told until it destroys her." Lucia fired at the screen, shattering it. "Enough!" she yelled. "Face me, Torres!" For a few seconds there was only silence. Then footsteps echoed from the shadows. Torres walked out slowly, his arm still bleeding, his expression calm. "You want me?" he said. "Then let's finish it." They circled each other in the dim light, both armed, both exhausted. The air between them felt electric, like years of anger were about to explode. Mendez held Camilla back, whispering, "Don't look." But Camilla couldn't turn away. Torres lunged first, knocking Lucia's weapon aside. They struggled, fists flying, metal clanging as they slammed into crates. Lucia managed to land a punch, but Torres grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her back. "You could have told me the truth," he shouted. "You could have saved him. I tried," she screamed, driving her elbow into his ribs. They fell to the ground, rolling. The fight wasn't clean or precise. It was raw, desperate, full of pain neither of them had ever let out before. Finally, Lucia got the upper hand. She pinned him down, gun pressed to his chest. Her face was full of rage and sorrow. "I didn't kill your brother," she said. "He died saving others. You've spent years chasing ghosts, while the real enemy watched us destroy each other." Torres looked up at her, his expression softening for the first time. "Then who?" he asked. Lucia hesitated. "The same people who gave you your orders, the ones funding all of this." Before he could answer, a shot rang out from the shadows. Torres gasped, a red stain spreading across his chest. Lucia turned, aiming toward the sound, but the shooter was already gone. She ran to Torres, kneeling beside him. "Stay with me!" she shouted. He coughed, blood on his lips. "You were right," he whispered. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." His eyes closed. Camilla screamed. Mendez rushed forward, but Lucia didn't move. She just stared at Torres's body, the sound of the gunshot still echoing in her ears. Then her radio crackled again, a new voice coming through, cold and unfamiliar. "General Vega," it said, "you've been chasing the wrong enemy. It's time you learned who's really in charge." Lucia froze. She knew that voice. It belonged to someone she trusted, someone from her own ranks. And in that moment, she realized the war hadn't even started yet. Lucia stood motionless beside Torres's body, her eyes lost in the shadows of that dark warehouse. The radio still crackled faintly with that cold, familiar voice. The soldiers around her waited for orders, unsure whether to move or stay quiet. Camilla clung to her mother's sleeve, shaking from fear and confusion. Mendez stood nearby, tense, his hand on his gun, as if he expected another attack at any second. The night outside was silent, but that kind of silence that hides danger, not peace. Lucia pressed the radio close to her ear, her tone sharp but steady. "Identify yourself." The voice on the other side chuckled softly, slow and controlled. "You already know who I am, General." Lucia froze. She did know that voice. "Torres was never your real problem," it continued. "He was just the distraction." The line cut off before she could respond. Lucia lowered the radio, her pulse racing. Mendez looked at her. "Who was that?" he asked. "Someone inside my own ranks," she muttered. "Someone with enough power to make Torres look like a pawn." She turned to her soldiers. "Get me every name still active on our classified communications list." Someone high up has been feeding information to the other side. Her men saluted and moved out quickly, leaving only Mendez and Camilla beside her. The smell of gunpowder and smoke still lingered in the air. Camilla tugged on her sleeve. "Mum," she whispered, "that man, he didn't look bad at the end. He looked scared." Lucia sighed heavily, her voice quieter now. "He was a good soldier once, but hate changes people. It eats them alive." Camilla lowered her eyes. "Are you scared?" Lucia looked at her daughter, forcing a small, tired smile. "Always," she said softly. "But fear reminds us what's at stake. It means we still care." They stepped outside, the night air biting cold against their faces. Helicopters hovered in the distance, their searchlights cutting through the mist. The city below still glowed with the aftermath of the explosions. Mendez walked behind them, still limping, his mind spinning with questions he didn't dare ask. He was out of his depth, that much he knew, but he also knew that walking away now would mean turning his back on the only people left who seemed to know what they were doing. A black SUV pulled up, and a soldier stepped out to open the door for Lucia. "We've secured the area, ma'am, but we found something near the north fence." Lucia frowned. "What is it?" "A body, ma'am. It's not one of ours." She followed him around the warehouse, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The man lying face down in the dirt wasn't a soldier. It was Director Salgado. His hands were bound, his face bruised, and a single bullet wound in the back of his head. Someone had executed him. "He was silenced," Mendez said quietly. "Whoever's behind this is cleaning house." Lucia nodded grimly. "And fast." She crouched beside the body, searching his pockets until she found a folded note. It was damp from the ground but still legible. On it, written in neat block letters, were the words, "The next one is you." Lucia stared at it for a long time before tucking it into her jacket. She stood and looked at Mendez. "We're running out of time." He swallowed hard. "So what now?" She turned toward the car. "Now we go after the one giving the orders." The ride back to the city was quiet. Camilla leaned against her mother, half asleep, her small hand gripping Lucia's arm as if afraid she'd disappear. Mendez sat in the front seat, staring out the window, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. Soldiers, explosions, conspiracies. It all felt like a movie he'd been dropped into without warning. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Lucia. "You think this goes all the way up, don't you?" he asked. Lucia nodded slowly. "Higher than you can imagine." When they arrived at the military headquarters, the entire building was on lockdown. Armed guards checked every badge twice, and the air inside was thick with suspicion. Lucia walked straight to the operations room. "I want all internal communications from the past week pulled up," she ordered. "Filter by encrypted frequencies only." The analysts rushed to work, screens lighting up with lines of code and intercepted signals. Mendez stood by the door, feeling out of place among the uniforms and formal ranks. Camilla sat quietly in a corner, drawing shapes on a notepad someone had given her. Lucia watched the screens, waiting, her arms crossed tightly. Minutes passed before one of the analysts spoke. "General, we found something. Someone used a command-level access code from your personal ID 2 hours ago." Lucia's head snapped up. "That's impossible. My ID is on me." "It was used remotely," the analyst said, "from inside the compound." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Lucia turned to her officers. "Who else has clearance at my level?" The answer came reluctantly from her second-in-command. "Only 2 others, ma'am. Colonel Rivas and Commander Torres." Lucia clenched her fists. "Torres is dead, which leaves Rivas," Mendez said quietly. Lucia's face hardened. "Find him." They searched the base for almost an hour before finding Rivas's office empty. The computer was wiped clean, the drawers locked. Lucia kicked the desk in frustration. "He's already gone." Mendez looked around. "There's got to be a clue." Camilla, who had followed them despite her mother's protests, walked slowly around the room. She stopped near a bookshelf and pointed. "Mom, this one's backwards." Lucia frowned. "What?" Camilla pulled out a thick book from the shelf. Behind it, there was a small black safe hidden in the wall. Lucia grabbed it and placed it on the table. "Code," she said. The analyst who had followed them connected a device and started working. A few tense minutes later, the safe clicked open. Inside were photos, documents, and a single flash drive. Lucia picked up one of the photos and froze. It showed her standing beside Torres and Rivas, shaking hands with a group of men in civilian clothes she didn't recognize. The caption at the bottom read, "Project Echo. Authorization complete." Mendez leaned over her shoulder. "What's Project Echo?" Lucia didn't answer. Her hands trembled as she turned the photo over. On the back, in Rivas's handwriting, it said, "It wasn't about weapons. It was about control." She inserted the flash drive into the nearest computer. A series of encrypted files appeared, each one labeled with government and military departments. He was collecting evidence, Lucia said. But for who? Mendez pointed to one folder marked with a simple red X. "Try that one." Lucia opened it. The screen filled with documents, bank records, shipment manifests, coded messages. It was all connected. The weapons in the mall, the data theft, the base explosion. And every document led to one name, the Minister of Defense. Lucia stepped back, her voice barely a whisper. "He's behind it," Mendez blinked. "The minister? But that's who gave me Torres," she interrupted. "He set all of this up, the smuggling, the cover-ups, the orders to silence anyone who got too close. Torres found out and tried to expose it, but they used me to stop him." Camilla looked up from the corner, her eyes wide. "Mum, he used you." Lucia nodded slowly. "And now he wants me gone too." Before anyone could react, the base lights flickered, and a loud alarm blared through the halls. An officer rushed in, shouting, "General, the gates! Someone's forcing their way in!" Lucia grabbed her weapon and turned to Mendez. "Get her to safety." "What about you?" "Just do it," she snapped. Mendez grabbed Camilla's hand and ran down the corridor as soldiers scrambled to respond. The sound of gunfire echoed through the building. Lucia and her team moved through the smoke-filled corridors, returning fire as dark figures in tactical gear stormed in. Whoever they weren't regular soldiers. They were professionals, fast and precise. One of her men fell beside her. Lucia ducked behind a wall, reloading. "They're not here to capture us," she said. "They're here to erase us." Mendez and Camilla reached the vehicle bay, but the exit was blocked by soldiers in black uniforms. "Stay behind me," Mendez whispered, pulling his sidearm. They ducked between trucks, trying to stay unseen. Camilla spotted something, a ventilation shaft slightly open near the wall. "There," she whispered. Mendez hesitated but then nodded. He lifted her up and helped her crawl inside. "Don't stop until you reach the outside. Go." "What about you?" she asked, tears welling up. "I'll find another way. Go, kid." Camilla disappeared into the vent, just as gunfire erupted nearby. Mendez turned, firing back, his heart pounding. Meanwhile, Lucia fought her way through the central corridor, taking down the last of the attackers near the control room. Smoke and debris filled the air. Then, through the haze, a new figure appeared, tall, dressed in a dark overcoat. It was the Minister of Defense himself, flanked by 2 guards. "You should have stayed quiet, Lucia," he said calmly. "You could have lived a comfortable life. But no, you had to play hero." Lucia aimed her weapon at him. "You used me," she said. "You made me the face of your corruption." He smiled faintly. "That's what soldiers are for. To take orders." Lucia fired, hitting one of his guards. The other returned fire, grazing her shoulder. She ducked behind a console. "You won't get away with this," she shouted. The minister chuckled. "I already have." He raised a small device. "You see, all your files, all your proof, it's gone." He pressed a button, and every screen in the room went black. "Goodbye, General." But just before he could fire, a shot rang out from behind him. The minister froze, eyes wide, and fell forward. Behind him stood Mendez, panting, holding a smoking gun. "Guess I'm not just a mall guard anymore," he said. Lucia stared at him in shock, then relief. "Where's Camilla?" "She got out. She's safe." Lucia stood, her arm bleeding, and looked down at the minister's body. "No," she whispered. "It's not over yet." She knelt beside him, searching his pockets until she found another flash drive, identical to Rivas's. On it, a label read, "Vault 17. She looked at Mendez. Whatever's on this, it's the key. He nodded. Then we better move before more of them show up. As they ran toward the exit, Lucia glanced out a shattered window and saw Camilla standing outside, waiting in the dark. Their eyes met through the smoke. She was safe, for now. But Lucia knew what the words Vault 17 meant. It was the code name for a top-secret facility buried deep in the desert, one that wasn't supposed to exist. And whatever waited, there was the reason all of this had begun. Lucia gripped the flash drive so tightly her knuckles turned white. The noise of helicopters faded into the distance, leaving behind only the crackling of small fires and the faint hum of broken lights. Mendez was breathing heavily beside her, his uniform torn and streaked with dust. Camilla stood a few meters away, her face dirty, her eyes wide but dry, too dry for a child who had just seen so much. Lucia turned toward her daughter, trying to find a calm she didn't feel. "We're leaving," she said firmly. "Now," Mendez frowned. "Where? The whole city's crawling with these people." Lucia looked at the flash drive in her hand. "Vault 17, she said quietly. "That's where everything leads. It's where this nightmare started." They didn't waste time. Mendez found a working jeep in the wrecked parking lot, and Lucia took the wheel. Camilla sat between them, wrapped in a jacket that was far too big. The ride was long and silent at first. The road out of the city was filled with smoke, overturned vehicles, and roadblocks. Lucia drove through them all with that same expression, focused, hard, almost cold. Mendez glanced at her now and then, trying to understand what was going through her mind. "You really think this vault exists?" he asked after a while. "It's not just some rumor." She didn't take her eyes off the road. "I've heard the name whispered before. A project so secret, not even the president has full access. Torres mentioned it once when he was still loyal. He said it was something the government was afraid of losing control of." Camilla was listening quietly, her voice small when she finally spoke. "Mom, are we in danger again?" Lucia hesitated before answering. "Yes," she said honestly, "but this time we're not running. This time we're finishing it." The highway gave way to dirt roads as the city disappeared behind them. The mountains ahead loomed dark and quiet. Mendez checked the GPS on the dashboard. "According to this, there's nothing out here." Lucia gave a humorless smile. "That's the point. You don't build something like Vault 17 where people can find it." She stopped the jeep at a bend in the road. "We walk from here." They climbed through thick brush until they reached a rocky slope that looked ordinary at first, until Camilla pointed. "There," she said. Hidden among the rocks was a metal door, half buried in dirt, with a keypad on one side. Lucia brushed away the dust and typed a sequence she remembered from an old access code Torres once used. The light above the keypad turned green, and with a deep metallic groan, the door slid open. Inside, a cold gust of air escaped, carrying the sterile smell of metal and electricity. The passage beyond was narrow, descending into darkness. Mendez looked around nervously. "You sure about this?" "No," Lucia said, "but we don't have a choice." They went down, the sound of their footsteps echoing against the steel walls. Lights flickered on one by one as they moved, as if the building itself was waking up. At the end of the corridor, they reached an enormous underground chamber filled with computer servers and sealed crates. In the center stood a glass control room, its lights still functioning. Lucia walked toward it, her reflection splitting in the glass walls. "This is it," she whispered. "Vault 17. They entered the control room. Dust covered most of the surfaces, but one terminal was still active, glowing faintly blue. Lucia inserted the flash drive. The screen blinked, and lines of data began to scroll rapidly. Camilla stood beside her mother, peering at the monitor. "What's in there?" she asked. Lucia stared at the screen, her expression growing darker. "Everything," she said. "Records of every operation, every illegal transfer, every order that came from above." Mendez leaned in. "So this proves the minister was behind it all?" Lucia shook her head. "It's bigger than him. Look." She opened one of the folders. Inside were files marked with international symbols, contracts, surveillance footage, payment trails connecting not just the Mexican government, but several foreign companies. Mendez rubbed his face. This is enough to bring down half the country. Lucia nodded. And that's why they tried to erase us. Before they could say more, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the corridor they'd come through. Mendez turned. We're not alone. Lucia yanked the flash drive from the terminal and tucked it into her jacket. Take Camilla, go! But Camilla shook her head. No, I'm not leaving you again. You have to! Lucia snapped. That's an order. Camilla stood firm, her chin trembling but her voice steady. You're not my general. You're my mom. The boots were getting closer. Lucia looked at Mendez, torn. Get her behind cover. She grabbed her rifle and took position near the entrance. The lights flickered again, and through the doorway appeared a squad of men in black tactical gear. Drop your weapon, General Vega! One of them shouted. Lucia fired first, dropping the lead man instantly. Mendez pulled Camilla behind a row of crates as bullets tore through the air. The sound was deafening in the metal room. Lucia moved like someone who'd fought her whole life. Calm, controlled, every shot deliberate. Mendez joined in, taking cover beside her. How many? He shouted. Too many, she yelled back. Grenades clattered on the floor. Lucia grabbed one and threw it back before it exploded, the blast shaking the walls. Camilla covered her ears, her small body trembling. For a moment, the gunfire stopped. A voice called out from the hallway, deep and confident. Lucia Vega, enough of this. You're surrounded. Come out and maybe we let the girl live. Lucia froze. She knew that voice. It wasn't Torres or the minister. It was Colonel Rivas. Mendez recognized the name from earlier. That's the guy who disappeared, he whispered. He didn't disappear, Lucia said bitterly. He changed sides. Rivas stepped into view, dressed in an immaculate uniform, calm as if he were walking into a boardroom. You've caused a lot of trouble, Lucia, he said, his tone almost friendly. You should have known better than to dig into something that wasn't yours to see. Lucia kept her weapon raised. You killed Torres. You framed me. You destroyed my base. Rivas smiled faintly. Torres was reckless. You, on the other hand, were a real threat. But don't take it personally. It's just politics. Mendez muttered. You've got to be kidding me. Lucia took a step forward. You worked with the minister. Rivas nodded. At first, but he got greedy. He wanted everything for himself. So we removed him. He tilted his head slightly. You're standing in what's left of his empire. And now, it's mine. Lucia's hands tightened on her rifle. You think you can just bury this? Rivas chuckled. Oh, it's already buried. The only thing left is to erase you and that data. He gestured to his men. Take them. But before anyone could move, Mendez fired first, hitting one of the soldiers in the leg. Chaos erupted again. Lucia lunged sideways, pulling Camilla down. The lights blew out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Muzzles flashed, the air thick with smoke. When the shooting finally stopped, the silence was heavy. Lucia crawled toward the console, groping for her daughter. Camilla, she called. I'm here, came the faint reply. Lucia reached her just as Rivas stepped out of the smoke, gun aimed at them both. It's over, he said. You can't fight the system, Lucia. You were part of it. She glared at him. Then I'll die breaking it. Before he could pull the trigger, a figure appeared behind him. Mendez, bruised but alive. He swung a metal rod with all his strength, striking Rivas in the back of the head. The colonel fell forward, stunned. Lucia jumped up and kicked the gun away. Rivas looked up at her, dazed but still smiling. You think killing me will change anything? There are others, more powerful. You can't stop what's coming. Lucia crouched beside him, her voice low. Then I'll make sure the world sees it before they silence me. She hit him hard with the butt of her gun, knocking him out cold. Camilla clung to her mother, crying softly. Lucia held her tight for a second, whispering, It's over for now. Mendez coughed, leaning against the wall. So what's next? We've got the drive, but how do we get it out? Lucia looked at the control terminal. We don't need to. We can upload it directly from here. She slid the flash drive back in and began typing furiously. If I can connect to an external network, I can leak everything to every news outlet, every agency. They won't be able to hide it anymore. The screen flashed. Connection established. Lucia hit enter. Files began to transfer rapidly, the progress bar racing across the screen. Mendez grinned. You did it. But just as the upload neared completion, an alarm blared, and the system displayed a new message. Remote override detected. Connection terminated. Lucia's heart dropped. No, she whispered. A second later, the speakers came to life with that same cold, unfamiliar voice they'd heard after Torres died. You didn't think it would be that easy, did you? Lucia stared at the monitor as the image of a man appeared on screen. He was older, in a dark suit, sitting at a desk with no visible insignia. His expression was calm, almost amused. "General Vega," he said, "I've been watching you for a long time, and I must say, you're quite the problem." Lucia's voice was sharp. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "Let's just say I'm the one who built all of this. Vault 17 was my creation." Mendez stepped closer, whispering, "He's the real one behind it." The man continued, "You've caused enough damage. You have something that belongs to me, and I will get it back. Enjoy your little victory tonight. It's the last one you'll have." The screen went black. Lucia stood there, frozen. Mendez finally spoke. "So what now?" Lucia looked down at the flash drive, still glowing faintly in her hand. "Now," she said quietly, "we find out who that man is." She glanced at Camilla, who was still holding her arm tightly. "And we make sure he never touches you or anyone else again." Outside, the wind howled through the mountain pass, carrying the distant sound of engines. More were coming. Lucia knew this wasn't over. If Vault 17 had a creator, then they hadn't even reached the top of the ladder yet. And for the first time that night, she felt something strange, hope mixed with fury, because now she finally knew what she was fighting for. Lucia barely slept that night. The wind outside the cabin howled through the cracks in the wood, and every sound made her hand twitch toward her weapon. Mendez had parked the jeep behind some rocks, hidden from sight, and now sat near the small window, rifle across his knees, staring into the darkness. Camilla was curled up on a mattress on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, finally asleep after hours of trembling. The only light came from a dying candle that flickered and cast long shadows on the walls. Lucia sat at the table, turning the flash drive over and over in her fingers, like someone handling a live grenade. She couldn't stop thinking about the man on the screen, the one who said he built Vault 17. His voice hadn't sounded like a stranger's. It had sounded like someone who knew her too well. Mendez glanced at her and spoke quietly, so as not to wake the girl. "You've been staring at that thing for hours. Whatever's on it won't change until we open it." Lucia didn't look up. "I'm not afraid of what's on it," she said softly. "I'm afraid of what it'll prove." Mendez frowned. "You think that man's telling the truth?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I've met people like him before. The kind who stay in the shadows while everyone else fights and dies. He's not a politician. He's the one who owns them." They sat in silence for a while. The candle hissed as it burned lower. Finally, Mendez spoke again. "You know, I used to think the army was the clean part of this country, the one place where people still believed in honor." He gave a small, bitter laugh. "Guess I was naive." Lucia looked up, tired but honest. "You weren't naive, Mendez. You were lucky. You hadn't seen what happens when power starts to rot from the inside." She paused, her voice turning colder. "Until now." Camilla stirred, whispering in her sleep. Lucia's face softened immediately. She got up, knelt beside her daughter, and brushed the hair from her forehead. "It's almost over," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was saying it for Camilla or for herself. When she returned to the table, Mendez was holding a small radio receiver he had found in one of the cabinets. "We can use it to scan frequencies," he said. "Maybe catch a transmission from whoever's still looking for us." Lucia nodded. "Do it!" The static filled the room as Mendez turned the dial. For a long time, there was nothing but noise. Then, faintly, a voice broke through. "All units, search sectors 5 through 9. High-priority target is General Vega. Orders are shoot on sight." Mendez looked at Lucia. "They're still hunting you." Lucia didn't flinch. "Let them. I'm done hiding." She turned on her laptop, inserted the flash drive again, and began scanning through the files. The folders were more encrypted than before, but she worked quickly, breaking through one layer at a time. Mendez stood behind her, watching the lines of code flicker across the screen. "You really know your way around this stuff," he muttered. "Torres taught me." she said quietly, back when we still trusted each other. After a few minutes, a video file appeared, locked with a code. She typed something and hit enter. The screen flickered, and the video began to play. It showed a meeting room, a long table surrounded by men in suits and uniforms. Lucia recognized several faces from high-ranking military officers, but at the head of the table sat the man from the earlier video, the one who had spoken to her. He was younger in this footage, his hair darker, but the same calm authority filled his voice. "Gentlemen," he said, "Vault 17 will not just store data, it will control it. Whoever owns it will control everything, economy, security, even elections." Mendez's mouth fell open. "They built it to spy on the whole country," Lucia nodded slowly. "And to blackmail anyone they wanted." The man in the video continued speaking, and then something in his words made her freeze. "Our success depends on the loyalty of those in the field. That's why we've appointed General Lucia Vega as primary field liaison." Mendez looked at her, stunned. "He said your name." Lucia felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she whispered. "That can't be right." But the video didn't lie. Her signature appeared on the final page of the document they displayed. She pushed away from the table, shaking her head. "I never signed that. I never knew what Vault 17 really was." Mendez's expression was unreadable. "But they're using your name. Every report we've seen, every file, it all traces back to you." Lucia slammed her fist on the table. "Because they needed a scapegoat. I followed orders. They told me it was a data protection project to stop cyber attacks. I thought I was protecting people." Camilla woke at the sound of her mother's voice and sat up, frightened. "Mom?" Lucia turned instantly, softening her tone. "It's okay, baby. Go back to sleep." But Camilla shook her head. "You're crying." Lucia wiped her face quickly. "It's just smoke, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." Mendez looked at her quietly, then said, "If that man created Vault 17, then he has everything he needs to destroy you, and maybe everyone else too." Lucia nodded. "That's why we can't let him control it." She pointed at the laptop. "He thinks he erased the data, but this drive still has a backup. We can use it against him." Mendez raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do we do that? March into the capital and ask for a meeting?" "No," Lucia said. "We expose him publicly. Leak everything all at once. The files, the videos, the names. But we need a secure network, one he can't shut down." Before Mendez could respond, the sound of engines echoed in the distance. Headlights cut through the cracks in the cabin walls. Lucia snapped the laptop shut. "They found us," she hissed. Mendez grabbed his weapon and moved to the door. "How many?" "2 trucks," he said, peeking outside. "Maybe 10 men." Lucia looked at Camilla. "You remember the tunnel under the cabin?" The girl nodded. "Go there now. Don't come out until I say." Camilla hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you," Lucia said, but her eyes betrayed the lie. As soon as Camilla disappeared through the trapdoor, Lucia and Mendez took positions by the windows. The first truck stopped outside, its doors slamming open. Flashlights swept across the yard. "General Vega!" a voice shouted. "Come out with your hands up," Mendez whispered. "They're not here to arrest us." Lucia nodded. "Then let's make them earn it." Gunfire erupted loud and sharp. The wooden walls splintered as bullets tore through them. Mendez fired back, dropping one of the soldiers near the porch. Lucia moved fast, rolling to the other side and shooting through a window. Smoke filled the room as furniture shattered. She could hear her daughter's muffled sobs from below the floorboards, and that sound pushed her harder. "Keep their heads down!" she yelled. One of the attackers threw a flash grenade through the window. The explosion of light and sound was blinding. Mendez stumbled back, disoriented. Lucia grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the back door. "This way!" They ran into the trees as the cabin behind them went up in flames. The fire lit up the night, turning the forest orange. They didn't stop running until they reached the stream half a mile away. Mendez collapsed, coughing. "We can't keep this up," he said. "They'll keep coming." Lucia knelt beside him, panting. "I know." She pulled out the flash drive. "That's why we end this tomorrow." Mendez looked at her. "You have a plan?" "We go to the source," she said. "The capital, the ministry building. That's where he'll be." He stared at her like she was insane. "That's suicide." She met his gaze. "It's justice." They made camp by the river until dawn. Lucia barely closed her eyes. Every time she did, she saw that man's face again. The calm smile, the arrogance. By sunrise, She was ready. Mendez tried one last time to talk her out of it. "Lucia, if you go in there, they'll kill you before you reach the front gate." She shook her head. "Not if the world is watching." Back at the cabin's ruins, Camilla waited for her mother's return. When she saw Lucia and Mendez approach, covered in soot and dirt, she ran into her arms. "I thought you weren't coming back," she cried. "I promised I would," Lucia said, holding her close. She crouched down so she was eye level with her daughter. "Listen to me, Camilla. What's happening now? It's not just about us. It's about everyone who's been lied to. I need you to be brave a little longer." Camilla nodded, trying to be strong even though her chin trembled. "I'm not scared anymore," she said. Lucia smiled weakly. "That's my girl." They got back in the jeep and started the long drive toward the city. The roads were eerily empty. Every checkpoint they passed was abandoned, as if the soldiers had been called elsewhere. The air was heavy with tension, like the calm before a storm. Mendez turned on the radio, scanning for news. Most stations were silent, but one was broadcasting an emergency statement. Government officials confirm unrest within the military. Investigations are underway regarding General Vega, wanted for treason and sabotage. Lucia laughed bitterly. "They're setting the stage." Mendez looked at her. "Then we'll change the script." By the time they reached the city limits, night had fallen again. The skyline glowed with lights, but it felt hostile now, like every window was watching them. Lucia parked in an alley near the ministry building. "This is it," she said quietly. She turned to Mendez. "If anything happens to me, you take Camilla and disappear." Mendez shook his head. "No way, we started this together." Camilla reached forward from the back seat and grabbed her mother's hand. "I want to help too." Lucia looked at her daughter and saw the same stubborn fire she'd had at that age. She didn't argue. "Then stay close to me," she said. They slipped through the shadows, avoiding patrols. Inside the ministry, the halls were quiet, too quiet. They reached the main chamber, where the big digital screens lined the walls, displaying government feeds. And there, standing in front of them, was the man from the video, waiting as if he'd known exactly when they would arrive. "General Vega," he said with a calm smile. "Right on time." Lucia raised her gun, her voice steady but cold. "You built all of this. The lies, the corruption, the deaths, and it ends tonight." He smiled wider, unafraid. "Oh, it ends, yes, but not the way you think." He turned slightly toward the screens, and one by one they flickered to life, showing live footage from all over the city. Soldiers, civilians, chaos. "You see, while you were running, I was preparing. The country needs a villain, and now, thanks to you, it has one." Lucia froze. On one of the screens, she saw her own face, her photo plastered with the word traitor in bold red letters. Camilla gasped. Mendez whispered, "He's broadcasting it live." The man leaned forward, eyes glinting. "You wanted the truth, General. The truth is, heroes don't exist. Only survivors." And before anyone could move, alarms blared, floodlights filled the hall, and soldiers stormed in from every direction. Lucia turned to Mendez and Camilla, her voice low but firm. "No matter what happens, you run." Camilla clutched her mother's arm. "I won't leave you." Lucia met her eyes with tears. She didn't have time to wipe away. "You have to, because if they take me alive, everything we've fought for dies." The man behind her gave a quiet order, and the soldiers raised their rifles. The lights flashed red, and in that split second before everything exploded into chaos, Lucia looked at her daughter one last time and whispered, "Remember who you are." Then she turned toward the soldiers, unflinching, as the screen behind her showed the world burning with lies, and the truth about to break free. The first shot didn't come from Lucia. It came from one of the soldiers standing to the left, nervous hands, too much tension, not enough patience. The gunfire broke the silence like thunder, echoing through the marble hall. Glass shattered, lights flickered, and the calm, smug face of the man behind the screens finally changed for the first time. He frowned. Mendez pulled Camilla to the ground behind a pillar, yelling her name, but Lucia didn't move. She stayed standing in the middle of the chaos, her weapon raised, her jaw clenched, her body trembling not from fear, but from something far stronger. She was done being the hunted. Bullets whizzed past her, soldiers shouted orders, and the air filled with smoke and dust. She took a deep breath and started walking forward through it all, slow and steady, her boots clicking against the marble floor like a drumbeat announcing judgment. The soldiers hesitated. There was something about her presence that froze them. This wasn't a general defending her name anymore. This was a mother walking toward the man who had ruined everything she had ever stood for. Mendez shouted for her to stop, but she didn't listen. The man behind the screens, still calm despite the chaos, pressed a button on his console, and all the monitors came to life again. News feeds, live footage, recordings of Lucia in uniform, of explosions, of soldiers marching. "You see," he said, his voice echoing through the speakers, "they already believe you're the monster. Why fight it?" Lucia fired a single shot that hit one of the cameras above him, sparks flying. "Because I'm not," she said, "and they're about to find out who really is." Mendez pulled Camilla behind a desk and reloaded. "We have to get out of here," he shouted. But Camilla, her small hands clutching her mother's pendant, looked toward Lucia and whispered, "She's not running anymore." The girl's eyes were wide, not with fear, but with something new, understanding. She had seen her mother fight, lead, cry, fall, but this was different. This was her rising. Lucia reached the center of the room and pointed her gun at the man. "End this," she demanded. He smiled. "You think you can fix the world by shooting me?" He lifted a small remote and tapped a button. Instantly, the screens behind him shifted to display rows of numbers, security codes, and military protocols. "I don't need soldiers to kill you, General. I can erase you with a single command." He pressed another key, and the overhead lights turned red. A deep hum filled the air as the building's lockdown system activated, sealing every exit. Mendez cursed under his breath. "He's closing us in." Lucia didn't flinch. "You built Vault 17 to control people, to make them afraid. But fear is a weapon that cuts both ways." She took a step closer. "You made me your enemy the day you used my name to hide your crimes." The man laughed softly. "You've always been my best creation, Lucia. Loyal, disciplined, blind to the truth until it was too late. You want justice? Here's your truth. Every order you gave, every mission you led, every man you lost was for me. You served my system all along." For the first time, Lucia hesitated. Her grip tightened on the gun, her mind flashing through years of service, medals, speeches about honor, all the lives that had ended under her command. "No," she whispered. "I fought for my country." He tilted his head, mocking. "Your country is me." Mendez looked up from cover and shouted, "Don't listen to him, he's just trying to break you." But Lucia's eyes were fixed on the man behind the desk. He pressed another button, and a series of images appeared. Photos of her past missions, classified reports, even one of Torres, the man who had died believing she was his enemy. "You see, even he thought you betrayed him," the man said, and he was right. Lucia's hand trembled, but then something inside her shifted. She looked at the photo of Torres and remembered his last words, the way he'd said she'd been fighting the wrong war. He hadn't meant she was guilty. He'd meant she'd been used. Her eyes hardened again, and when she spoke, her voice carried over the noise like steel. "You're right," she said. "I did serve you, but not anymore." She fired. The bullet shattered the control panel in front of him, sparks flying. The lights flickered wildly. Alarms blared. Soldiers rushed in through side doors, but Mendez and Lucia fired back in unison, covering each other, moving like two people who'd fought together for years. Camilla crouched low, watching everything through the smoke. She wasn't crying anymore. She was waiting for her mother to win. Lucia vaulted over the desk as the man ducked for cover. They struggled briefly, the remote falling to the ground. He reached for it, but she kicked it away. He lunged for her weapon, and for a moment they were face to face, breathing hard, the sound of chaos all around them. "You can't stop what's coming," he hissed. "Vault 17 isn't a place, it's a system. It's already out there." She pushed him back against the wall. "Then I'll burn the system down," he smirked. "And your daughter, you think she'll survive a world without control?" Lucia froze. It was the first time he'd mentioned Camilla. Her eyes flicked toward where her daughter hid, and that was his mistake. The man saw the flicker of emotion and went for his gun, but Lucia was faster. She grabbed his wrist, twisted hard, and the gun clattered to the floor. She hit him once, twice. her anger years in the making. Then she stopped, breathing heavily, her gun aimed at his chest. He smiled, blood dripping from his lip. Do it. Prove me right. Show them what kind of hero you really are. For a long moment she said nothing. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Mendez stepped closer, shouting over the noise, "Lucia, don't! Killing him won't fix it!" Camilla's voice broke through, trembling but clear. "Mom, please." Lucia's arm shook, her face torn between fury and heartbreak. Then slowly she lowered the gun. "No," she said quietly. "Justice isn't revenge, it's truth." She grabbed the man by the collar and dragged him toward the main control panel. "You want to show the world what I've done," she said. "Let's show them everything." She slammed the flash drive into the console, overriding the system. The screens changed again, this time not to propaganda or orders, but to files, videos, and documents exposing every lie, every secret, every name behind the corruption. The live feed went public across every news channel, every phone, every government terminal. The man struggled, shouting, "You don't know what you've done!" Lucia's voice was calm now, almost tired. "I set the record straight." Outside, sirens blared across the city as the truth spread. Inside the hall, soldiers lowered their weapons, confused as their screens lit up with their own leaders' crimes. Mendez looked around, disbelief in his eyes. "You did it," he said. "They can't hide it anymore." Lucia turned to him, her face pale. "They'll still try." The man behind her reached for his gun one last time, snarling, "You ruined everything!" But before he could aim, Lucia spun and fired. The sound was deafening in the marble chamber. He fell to the ground, eyes wide, a look of shock frozen on his face. For a moment no one moved. Smoke drifted through the hall like fog after a storm. Camilla ran to her mother, wrapping her arms around her waist. "It's over," she whispered. Lucia hugged her tightly, closing her eyes. "Yes," she said softly, "it's over." But outside, the city wasn't quiet. People were in the streets, shouting, demanding answers. The whole country had seen what Lucia had revealed. The truth was out, but so was her name. She was both hero and traitor now, depending on who told the story. Mendez came up beside her, his voice low. "They'll come after us again." Lucia nodded. "I know." He gave her a tired smile. "So what now?" She looked down at her daughter, then back at him. "Now we disappear. Let the world rebuild itself. Our part's done." They left through the back exit as dawn began to break. The city skyline glowed gold under the rising sun, and for the first time in days, the air felt still. Lucia walked with Camilla's hand in hers, Mendez following behind. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. What mattered had already been said. At the edge of the city, Lucia stopped and looked back one last time. In that moment, she didn't see the chaos or the destruction. She saw every face she'd ever fought for, every soldier she'd led, every person who believed in justice, even when it felt impossible. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Camilla squeezed her hand. "Where will we go now?" she asked. Lucia took a deep breath. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere they can't find us." The girl nodded, resting her head against her mother's arm. "Can we finally rest?" Lucia smiled faintly. "Yes, Mija, now we can rest." They got in the jeep and drove toward the horizon, leaving behind the city that had burned with lies, but now, maybe, had a chance to start over. As the sun climbed higher, Lucia looked in the mirror and saw her daughter's face, innocent, tired, but full of life. She realized then that all the fighting, all the pain, had been worth it for this one simple truth. She hadn't lost everything after all. The world would remember her however it wanted. To some, she'd always be the general who turned against her own. To others, she'd be the one who brought the truth to light. But to Camilla, she'd always just be Mom, the woman who never stopped fighting for what was right. And somewhere deep in the heart of the system she'd destroyed, a single red light blinked back to life on a hidden server. Waiting. A soft voice echoed through the static. "Vault 17, system reboot initiated." Lucia didn't hear it. She was already far down the road, free at last, unaware that the battle she thought she'd ended was only sleeping. Now tell me in the comments, what's the first word that comes to your mind when you think of truth? Not honesty, not justice, truth. The word that means what's left when everything else falls away. I'll be reading, and if you like this story, press the screen and watch this other one. It's even more intense. And I promise you won't see the ending coming.